So we're just starting back after lunch, and we've got a session with Gurj Kang in a moment. I've known Gurj for a good while. He'll do his own intro because he'll sell himself far better than I will. But he's worked in the public, private, and voluntary sector as financial manager, financial controller, financial director. He sits on the board of a couple of charities in the northwest, and Yorkshire and Humber, I think, as well. And yeah, he'll tell you about what he's been up to. But I just have always said it's quite rare to get somebody who's got both all that great knowledge around finances, accounting, managing finances well, who understands the charity sector and social enterprise world, and also doesn't send people to sleep because it's quite a topic, isn't it? It's the one we all avoid, and I'm sure you'll find Gurj can put things in plain English and walk us through this stuff so that it feels more manageable. Great as well that we introduced Gurj to Unlimited early this year, and he's been delivering a whole bunch of workshops for Unlimited over the past year. So good that we've snaffled you into our session here. I don't know if you want to screen share, Gurj, so we've got your stuff ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Shelley and I will let people into the call if anybody's joining us a bit late after lunch. And as we've said before, Gurj, Shelley and I are available between 2:30 and 3 o'clock for some one-to-ones. So I'll be looking in the chat shortly, or I might ask Shelley to help with that actually, to see if you can have a look in the chat and pull out anybody who seemed to want a one-to-one, and over email, Shelley will perhaps fathom the best line up for that. Is that okay? Hopefully, yes. Anyway, over to you, Gurj. Let's crack on. I know there's yet more learning to be done this afternoon. We're putting people through the paces today, and this morning we talked about Shelley led people through a session on kind of products, services, I guess redefining and using different language to describe what people do, from previous sort of activities, projects, events, support services, different things that people do. We've been looking at them as products and services. We've been looking at what's core and what might be additional or reactionary, or what people might be piloting or doing a piece of research and development work that might turn into a more longer term product or service. I've walked everybody through different ways of approaching business planning. So we've looked at some basics around SWOT analysis and started to describe what a PESTLE is, and I will be running sessions on PESTLE reports again in more depth so people can have a go at looking at that themselves. We've also looked at the business model canvas and different versions of that, and clearly along the bottom of that business model canvas, it's all about the money. What are your things about resources, surpluses, and what your revenue looks like. So today's afternoon session is all about making sense of the finances. And over to you, Gurj. You want to say a bit more?
No problem. Thank you very much, Nicola. I really appreciate the introduction. As Steve mentioned, I'm Gurj Kang. I'm going to be leading the session this afternoon. I appreciate you just come back off lunch. Normally people can be a bit sleepy. This sends people off to sleep faster than anything else. I really, really do want you to keep engaged if you can. And again, I am getting conscious of how much content we might be running through. So in terms of these slides, any of the other working pieces, I'm happy to share those with you, Nicola, if you want to distribute those out to any members of the group afterwards, if need be. It's something that we can think about and look at. But this session's been recorded, so you'll be able to look back at this session, view it again, and go through the slides. I'm going to quickly effectively cash flows and budgets, and we're going to run through them in a way to understand their mechanism and what they're about. So let me just start with the slides now.
I don't know if the sound quality is a bit muffly for anyone else. It just sounded a little bit muffly somehow.
It might be my connection, and I apologise in advance if it is, but hopefully...
I think if you lean forward, it'll be fine.
Not a problem, I'll do that. As I say, we're going to do the introduction. I'm just going to give you a bit of background about me in terms of the companies I've worked for and some of the work that I've covered for. I've been working alongside Nicola and Flourish and also Unlimited for a good while, alongside some individual clients as well, in the Northwest and the Yorkshire and Humber region. In regards to my background, I work for a number of different organisations, and there's just a sample of a couple of them. I'm currently working with the ICO, so in terms of data protection, etc., that's very key and important as well. So governance and finance are key kind of aspects of what I do. Budgets and forecasts I've done for longer than I'd like to admit, and I think it's a very key part of just the process. And what we aim to do really with these sessions is to try and to break it down in terms of language, but also try and build confidence. So the whole idea is I'm trying to gauge where you are perhaps at the beginning of the session. By the end of the session, I'm hoping that you're going to be far more confident in understanding budgets and for the fact that the fear of them has been taken out. The way the session is going to run is I want to run through the cash flow detail and mechanics of the report. I also want to run through budget types and methodology, and then there is an example which I can run through. So I'm hoping we can get to the point, cover that in good time as well. So I appreciate that I might be running through things slightly quickly, but if so, please do put any questions or any pointers that you have in the chat, and that'll be moderated, and we'll be able to pick that up as well. Excellent. Cash flow forecast, key points. I'm going to run through these, talking through the point of the cash flow. The cash flow is a really important document for any organization because what it does is it actually indicates and measures survival. So a lot of you will be working as an organization, a lot of you will be working with funders, will be going for investment, and cash flow forms one of the key aspects of your financial reporting to be able to understand where you are. It's effectively like your bank statement, so it gives someone an idea about how liquid you are, what you're able to kind of invest in, what activities you're able to engage in, and it's a really important piece of documentation. And the other part of it, it actually measures cash items and their timing. I'm just going to run through some of the bullet points because some people sometimes have misconceptions around it. And I will be sharing an Excel version or a template of a cash flow, which we'll be able to see once we start looking through the example as well. But the cash flow itself must only contain items which are cash. We're not concerned with anything that's technically an accounting term. Depreciation is a fantastic example. I'm not sure how au fait many of you are, but depreciation is something which is a technical piece in terms of timing. This is literally like, is the cash coming in? Is the cash going out? So if you wanted to compare that in terms of your own bank statements, that would be any salaries coming through, and that would be the mortgage or the rent going out. You can basically see that money coming in and out, and it has to be a cash item. We have to include the items and the services as and when it's paid, even if it's paid for in advance of use. So the cash flow is concerned about the timing of the payment. You might buy a license, a software license, which lasts 12 months at the beginning of January. We're concerned about declaring that amount in January. We're not concerned about splitting it or apportioning it out on the cash flow statement. That's not the point. So we should, if you have a singular cost for an item that lasts for a longer period of time, we're concerned about when the timing of that singular purchase. Be clear about the items. The cash flow is something which is useful to you and useful to others to be able to read and understand your business and its situation. You need to set separate lines to be able to understand their cash impact better. A term I use a great deal, and I'll use when we look at the budgets as well, is called granularity. And I talk about granularity on the basis that if you can get things down to their basic building blocks, it allows you to understand its performance. It allows you to understand exactly what's happening and make sure that you've actually captured all of the detail. Cash flows, again, be honest about transactions. It is easy to miss items. The way to kind of think about that is if you had part cash, part card, and you're basically using your card for purchases and using cash for purchases. It's absolutely easy to record the card purchases because you're going to get a statement telling you exactly what happened, when and where. But with the cash ones, you're not. And sometimes that can happen in an organization, and sometimes it's just not easy in terms of receipts and details, and or if you have teams of people working for you, how and when that money is being spent. So it's important to try and see that you can make sure that that's visible and transparent. And it's easy to miss things. I've seen it happen, and it happens quite honestly. We're all human. But yes, be honest about the transactions. When did it happen and how much was it? Be honest about all the items and the services needed and their cash value. Often in a cash flow forecast, you might have a period of time which you're reporting, which is based on actuals. If you're forecasting into the future, the whole idea is you have to be honest about the items and services that you will need. And when we talk about their cash value, if you haven't incurred that cost yet, the idea is to base that upon a historical cost that you paid before, maybe uplifting for inflation if you know that applies, or using a quotation. So if you're going to use a service for the first time, there's nothing wrong in approaching the provider and saying, can you provide me with a quotation? So I have a ballpark figure of how much that's going to be. And that can be the value that's included within the cash flow forecast going forward. And the forecast is very much that. It's a forecast. I've worked in this industry for 17 years. I've worked alongside a lot of different people and a lot of different levels. And I'll be honest with you, there are people who get paid to do this as a living and they get things wrong. So please do not put that pressure on yourself. If you read in the news about organizations that cannot, they didn't manage to sort of survive or they went under, somebody was being paid a lot of money to manage their cash flow and their budgets and their forecasts, and even they couldn't get it completely correct. So the concept of a forecast is, please don't beat yourself up about it. It's not meant to be accurate. It's not meant to be completely 100%. In fact, if a budget and the actuals always show correctly as being exact, that means that all of your costs are either fixed or there's something incredibly suspicious. It reminds me of my GCSE geography homework where I actually made up all the reports and handed it in, and you had to make anomalies. It just doesn't happen like that. So the key thing about it is trying to reduce the pressure on yourself, because the forecast is a case of saying, this is what I'm expecting it to be. If you have any evidence to back that up, whether it's a supplier quotation, whether it's having worked with a partner or supplier before, and you run that activity, you can sort of use the historical cost as a guide to say, roughly, this is what it cost last time. I'm expecting this to be this much next time. That's absolutely fine. So that's really important. And honesty is a really key virtue, because the cash flow and the budget, as we discussed, are your best friend, right? And this is the thing that people forget. They get scared of them. They don't want to approach them. The cash flow tells you exactly where you are. So the cash flow basically starts to tell you how much money is coming in and how much money is going out. It tells you what the position that you're at, and it tells you what you're able to do. So it gives you options, or it indicates that there are no options. That isn't a bad place. People get really scared about approaching that, about being honest about their cash flow and realizing that they perhaps don't necessarily have the funds or the money. And over lockdown and during the COVID pandemic, that's been even heightened for a lot of organizations of various size. But I would say that it's really important to think about how the fact this works. The cash flow and budget are your best friends. They're your friends that tell you to go home because you're too drunk. They're the friends that honestly tell you that what you're wearing doesn't necessarily make sense. And the thing about it is, you might not want to hear that, but what those people are doing is signposting things for your benefit. That's how you have to do it. So taking the fear out of actually approaching them is saying that's fine. If your cash flow is showing that you're going to have a deficit based upon all the items that you have within income and within expenditure in a given period of time, it's signposting that there is a there's a cash flow issue, and or it means that you need to either have other funding or look at income strategy. So the cash flow will continually inform your strategy. And if you're using it as a forecast, the idea is you can start to see, hopefully in the future, when you might come across an issue or a problem, or when you might come across a period of time that you're going to have to either perhaps go into a form of hibernation, or maybe not be able to conduct an activity to survive. And it's helping you do that. It's helping you work out those bumps in the road. And that's the key point. So as honest you are with it, the more useful it is to you. And you should never be afraid. And the thing about it is it's unlike other social situations. This is something that you and the cash flow on the budget see. No one else sees that. So you can deal with the outcome in your own way. But it's really important to remember, if it's negative, if it's not the answer that you expected, if it's indicating that you can't perhaps grow or expand at the speed that you wanted to, or that you expected to, then really it's important to think about the fact this is signposting, right, maybe we just hold back, or maybe we need to go for more funding, maybe this, and it will signpost a solution. And that's the point, that's the positive of it. It will always signpost the way out. And it just means that has then to be followed through. So that's really, really important. And you have to remember, yeah, absolutely, me, other people, I've done cash flow forecasts, I've done cash flow forecasts for departments in Morrison. We had no idea what would happen. It was just a forecast. We had to wait until the actuals to understand what came through. So essentially, no one's going to be measuring you on it being absolutely 100% exact, but they will be measuring you on the honesty. So the key thing is, please be honest. We're going to have a look at an example of a cash flow for 12 months. The key action again is to detail the opening balance. Each item is either cash in or cash out, and then the closing balance informs of the available cash. I'm just going to switch my screen really quickly.
People who are concerned about their descent.
Oops, I think we've got people just joining us. There we go.
Just going to stop sharing this screen and just move on to that cash flow template really quickly, because
It's hard, isn't it, to visualize these things sometimes when you've working through bullet points. So Gurj has got some examples for us where what he's just been describing starts to come into practice. And some of you will have started putting these kinds of documents together for bids. Some of you will have been using these for years, but it's just to kind of recap on how to structure them and make the most of them.
Absolutely. I mean, this is very much a blank template, but the whole idea is it's trying to get the mechanism right. So we're starting and we're running from November through to December. We're going from 2021 up until 2022. And it's interesting that it runs across period and cross year. We've got October closing balance. So the idea would be that this would be your cash closing balance for October. So what the cash flow does, it says, right, this is how much cash you had at the beginning of the period. And what we do, it snakes around. The way to think about this document, I'm going to just scroll further down. I hope you can see all this. I'm just going to make it slightly smaller, and hopefully that will take away from being able to understand things. It snakes like this. It goes all the way down, and then the closing figure is then the opening figure for the next period. And it snakes all the way down, and then the closing figure is literally just the opening balance there. And you can link those in. So these can actually be linked in. So if I was to, basically to enter some figures in here, and I was just put 1200, and then literally put in for salaries, put in 800, that would start giving me a minus 400 balance. If I started off at 2,500, that basically starts to filter into the sheet. So this is all automated. I'm not sure how all of you are okay on Excel. This is probably complicated and it's explainable, but the idea is you start off with an opening cash balance. That opening cash balance then adds the income that you have in that period, all the expenditure, and if you go down to the
Good. I'm just letting you know your sound's going in and out a little bit. I don't know whether headphones might make it easier or whether that just tangles things up.
No, absolutely. Let me see. If
It might make you look like you're going flying around the world, but I know you've got a pair of fancy headphones, and
I do. They're from my phone, so basically I'll keep them on. Bear with me 1 second.
it might help. I don't know if that's helpful for other people, but I just thought it's a wee bit muffly, and if this helps, all the better.
Absolutely. Let's see if we can get this one.
See what happens. Sometimes when
Is that better?
I think it might be. Let's find out. You keep talking and we'll find out.
Fine. So essentially, the template that we're looking at, as we say, starts off with the opening balance, and it goes right from the opening balance. I've just put in an example of 2,500 in October, and in that first column, we can see that we've got 1,200 income. It counts that, it deducts all the expenditure, so it takes all that, takes 800 that I've just put it off, and it gives us basically a closing balance. That balance there. So the net cash flow within the period is 400, but the cash position was 500, and it takes that difference, deducts it. That then becomes the opening balance for the next period, and that's how that flows through. So it flows all.
What I was going to say, Gurj, people might be looking at this and going, and this is a template that Gurj has as a blank template that if you want to restart some of your budgets, or you need to put a new one together for a funder, or you want to start as you mean to go on with certain templates, we are going to share these with people so that they can use these for their own purposes as well.
Absolutely. I think it's a case of being able to use these templates, and what I've done in the piece I was just discussing, when you look at the left hand side here, obviously we've got the months that are split out across the top. On the left hand side, within income, I've just split income with examples of types of income that you might have that might be your organization. You're more than welcome to use a template and alter those to make them fit. But the idea about being granular is really important, because the minute that you split those things out into the actual pieces they exist in, it's easier to see the impact of them individually, line by line. So instead of just having one, you end up having a separated line. So you can start to see, for example, in this example, how sales income versus grant funding versus furlough income, that was applicable a while back, versus gift aid, reclaims, or legacies and loans will all act independently. So you can start to see how they begin to behave. And what that does is, it's being honest, and it feeds back to you. It starts to tell you which element of your income stream is working, which element might be failing, which element isn't performing as perhaps you expected it to. And therefore, it is therefore signposting to a solution. So it starts to give you an idea about what to look to. We could spend a lot of time filling in this template, but obviously the whole idea is this is a template we can share. You'd be more than welcome to amend and alter that so that you can have a play around with it. All of the sums and details are completed. So, they're all already kind of filled in. So you can put numbers in and then also change the subject details on the side, and then it can be applicable to you. You can have a bit of a play. So that's a really kind of interesting. That's the best way to understand the mechanics of this. It's the best way to see how the numbers work for you.
Put it into your own practice. I wonder if anybody's got any questions at this point, because obviously we've sort of been whistling through there. Things might obviously be coming up further down the line, but I just wondered as a quick point there, whether anybody got any particular queries or things to check, or something you might have been doing with a cash flow document or template that you wanted to just flag up.
I had a very quick question. If you've got a grant that's being paid in stages, do you put the whole thing in at first, or do you put the stage payments as and when they're expected to come in?
Stage payments as and when they're expected to come in. So the key thing is timing. So if I was to say, for example, let's say grant funding. So hopefully you can see my screen and the template at the moment. In that example, let's say that you had, I'm not sure, but let's say you have £500 coming in January, and then phased you have another 500 coming in April, and then you have another 500 in July. The whole point of cash flow, it only works if you're honest about the timing of that cash coming in as an input or an output. So yeah, it's not concerned about any accounting technicalities. It's not concerned about accruals, prepayments. You don't have to worry about anything. That is incredibly simple and straightforward. All it wants to know is when did the cash come in, or when was it paid out, and how much was it, and just bring it into the right period against the right line. So yeah.
Thank you.
Oh no. And the
Gurj has got a good example coming up where he'll probably play around a little bit more with this theme, and also look at sort of projecting the future and what happens if you misproject, or how to spot when you're going to come a cropper.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about being honest. It's like saying, if you went out to the shops and you bought something today, it's today that it's within that time period that cost has to go in. If you get literally checked through the post and you bank it today and it goes in, it's that period that it goes in. It's that way of working, being completely honest. So I'm just going to go back to the slides, because we're going to run through budgets, and we've also got a budget example to run through. I'm very conscious that this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but you'd be more than welcome to grab. I know there's a couple of slots afterwards to grab some time with me, and you're more than welcome to get hold of me after the session as well, if you do have any additional questions. So I'm just going to go back to budget. So we've just did a really whistle-stop tour of kind of cash flow forecast. We're having a look through to see exactly how the mechanics are, how it works. That template will be shared to be able to play around with that, and that is the main way that you can understand and learn how it all kind of fits together. Budgets, as we move on to them, I know again a massive signifier of fear for a lot of people. They shouldn't be. Again, similar to cash flows, they are very much as worthy to you in terms of as the input is into the budget. You have to be honest with it, and absolutely the budget will give you the same detail back. Why are they important? They're more than important than just for funding. They're really important for giving cost behavior analysis. So we were talking about being granular and being able to see things on an individual line basis, so you can see cost and income stream analysis. It's important for evaluation, because a budget gives you an idea about where you expect it to be or what your intention is, and the evaluation point is where are you actually against that budget position. That's the key point. It's motivation. If you have an income drive, if you need to generate funds or apply for grants, it gives you motivation to understand when those grants need to be applied for. It gives you motivation to try and hit those targets. If you're trying to reduce costs, it does exactly the same. It's information sharing. The budget should be a document that simply through numbers, you should be able to pass to somebody, and they should be able to understand your vision and the ambition of what you're hoping to achieve. Or they should be able to understand exactly what state the venture or the organization is in. And that's a really important thing when you go to funders and you go to grant applications and they want your financials. They'll always ask for either a cash flow forecast and or a budget for a given period of time. They might ask for past historical information, such as management accounts or signed off accounts, if you have those, or if they're applicable to you. If you're brand new, obviously you won't, so you'll need to wait 12 months before you can showcase that. But that information sharing is really important. It's expectation. So the budget indicates where you expect to be. If we're using a 12-month time frame, it's where you expect to be in a year's time. So it's like going in for an interview question saying, where do you see yourself in a year's time? The budget should show where you expect to be. And that's that whole piece. Strategy, delivery. The whole thing about the budget is it's saying, what is your strategy and how will you deliver it? What are your resources? Where is your income? What are your costs? And what do you expect to deliver utilizing those resources across that period of time? So it links in with information sharing. It's something that then becomes really clear. Clear being clarity. And that's the whole point. If you're honest with it and you're granular with it, people can see all the different income streams. They can see all the different expenditure points. They're able to understand exactly how the business works. And the thing about it is it's more important for you. Some people produce budgets just so that they can actually comply with funding regulations or funding applications or for external pieces. The budget is crucial to yourself, first and foremost. People come to me with ideas, they talk to me about things, and it's brilliant. I say, right, let's just do a really basic budget. Let's span out exactly what we think it's going to be. How is it going to look? And when we do that, sometimes it doesn't necessarily give them the output that they expected, because as I said before, you have to be honest and you have to work through it. And when you include everything, sometimes it's not there, but the budget gives you a really strong guide on all these points, on being on the evaluation, on the motivation, on the clarity, and problem identification. We talked about cost behavior analysis, income stream analysis. It starts to give you an idea when incomes may be drying up, when expenditures may be too high, and it starts to signal all of these things to you, and it speaks to you. It sounds really strange. I'm not that strange. I've been working with them for years, but they genuinely do speak to you. So you can see the numbers. If I didn't know anything about any one of your ventures, but you were to hand me a forecast or a budget, I'll be able to pick up patterns and say, so that's what you're expecting here, that's what you're expecting here. What does that mean and why is that there? And it starts to prompt questions. And it works with you if you're always taking those prompts and being able to justify those answers or move through. So there's a couple more slides. The key things to think about in terms of budget work through. You've got to treat the creation like a science and the review as an art. So basically, when you're creating a budget, and we're going to go through that process when we look through, when we whiz through an example, you'll see that we're going to produce the evidence, we're going to produce a backup, we're going to talk about all of our assumptions, we're going to take everything that we know about all the costs and the incomes and their timings. So that is science. The review of it is moving things around and understanding, this may not happen. Actually, I might be able to pull that cost. Actually, there may be inflation. Energy prices are rising, so I have no idea what 2022 will end up at for my gas and electricity charges, so on and so forth. Granularity is the key. Get to the basic unit. If you gave me a budget that just said income and expenditure and had a single figure on it, it would mean nothing to me. Granularity is key. You have to get to the whole point of what is that income made up of? How can we see what is the area that's spiking and what is constant? We won't be able to determine that unless we're being honest and clear about it. And the budget can then serve as building blocks. So if you get to the basic unit, you can always build back up. We talked about producing evidence. Build, challenge, and ensure that you record assumptions and workings. A budget and a forecast is that. It isn't based upon definites, it isn't based upon exact numbers. You might have a quotation from a supplier, that quotation may go up. You might have a quotation for a particular project, that project cost may go up. The idea is you can only go with the information as you have it at the point of constructing the budget. But the key thing is a lot of that might be assumptions, it might be workings, and that's absolutely fine. So a lot of people put pressure on themselves to get it absolutely right, or they don't put enough pressure on themselves to get the evidence there. You have to strike a balance. By all means, you don't need to go into it to the nth degree and into minutiae in detail, but you do need to have the evidence there, which is just backed by sound, safe assumptions and workings. And we'll do that when we run through the examples. And be clear about your assumptions. So if you have, when you're producing the budget and you have the workings or you want to put notes next to it, just say, I believe this is the case because this is based upon last year and we believe it's going to be the same level of activity. Absolutely fine, because if you detail your assumptions, someone can understand exactly how you got to that number. Some of the greatest financial minds might do something in the middle of the night and not note it down and talk through it verbally, and it means nothing. It has to represent on the page. Budgeting methods. There's two methods which may apply to yourself and your venture depending upon your structures. Some of you may be more established, some of you may be starting off. If you're established and you have tiers and hierarchies and teams, then top-down budgets are something that you can employ. And the whole idea is that they're set by management and they're used to deliver the strategy as they see fit for the organization. If you're starting off new, typically this is what you will follow because you'll be the main person generating the strategy, trying to build the budget to make sure it reflects your strategy and your mission, and that's the way that it works. If you're a bit larger and you're growing and you've got more teams, then participative budgets can also help, because the members of your team, participative means that it's used by gathering information from around the business you build up. So there might be 5 people within the whole organization or the venture, and you want to speak to all 5 of them and say, I want you to feed back and think what the cost may be within this area. I want you to tell me what you think the incomes may be as a consequence. You may be working with external partners, third-party people to help support your fundraising or any of your bids, in which case you speak to them and say, where do you think that we're going to be for income for the end of the year or halfway through the year? What do you think the cost will be associated with that? And that's a form of participation in terms of gathering as much evidence and information as you can. For most businesses, it's a combination of both. As I said, because you might not always be working by yourself. And even if you are working by yourself, there's no harm in actually having somebody else just check that detail and just give you a second opinion. How to approach it? How to approach your budget is gather as much information as you can. The information gathering is literally that. It's like squirrels, like literally just gather and just bring it all together. Once you have all the information there, be as honest as you can. Now, I'll give you an example. We worked with an events company and they talked about actually holding stock and all their inventory and all their material in particular. And it wasn't even a warehouse because it was such a small venture. They were holding it in the garage in their house. And then they said to me, yeah, brilliant. So we don't have any cost to that because I'm holding it in my garage. I have no stock holding cost. I went, that's fine. And they said, yeah, but we're going to run an event. We're going to run an event at this venue, at this venue, at this venue. So 3 venues are going to run it at. I said, brilliant. And what they'd done is they'd put down the cost of the hire. They put down the cost of the fees for the venues. And they put down an indicative level of income. They hadn't included the cost of transporting the stock to the venues. And I said, well, where's this come from? And they said, oh, well, we've got friends and family coming in. You may have friends and family coming in. When people are starting off, and if you're quite small, you're reliant on friends and family, you're reliant on volunteers. Believe me, if your friends and family have something more urgent to attend to and they can't make it, and you haven't built that cost in, it's going to be an exceptional cost against what you expected it to be. So it's always really important to try and build in the cost of an expenditure, especially if you're using a volunteer force, which you know that you're not necessarily fully dependent upon, because if that fell through and that was a key deliverable or key aspect of you delivering your event or delivering any service, it's going to affect that delivery. So it's really important to think about it. And being honest means that you go back and think about every single stage, every single incurred cost, everything else that you need to have for it. Insurance is one that a lot of people just miss. They think sometimes that they don't need to have insurance either for themselves as a practitioner or working with other people, or for the site where they may be storing their goods.
Good. Just picking up on that as well. I mean, that you make a good point there. Lots of people at early stages of development, or even further down the line, if you're very volunteer led and a lot of pro bono support for things, these can be sustainable ways of working if they're consistent and you've got the reach into people that can help in those ways. But as well as Gurj says there, costing it in to a funding bid can sometimes give you a bit of bandwidth. If you don't have to spend that, you can then repurpose it into something else. Or also, if you haven't fully costed out what things might, all of this free time, whether it's help, volunteering, pro bono support, as part of your social value measurement and your impact measuring, there's a whole swathe of stuff that you're not factoring in. So there's different reasons for even if you don't have it in your full cash flow document or all of your I guess operational planning costs and delivery costs, even if you're keeping a log of hours done, space for free, keeping a tally of what you've had in kind is really valuable for lots of purposes, for either building it into funding bids in future, for reporting the great social value and impact you're having through pro bono support, and as Gurj says, to leave no stone unturned, and not miss things off your budget list where you might have those as costs, if someone lets you down.
It's exactly that. You've really hit the nail on the head there, Nicola, because if you're working and you're starting off, and a lot of people can be established 2-3 years down the line and they're still using friends and family and volunteers, but nowhere in their financial documents are they detailing what the opportunity cost of that would be. So because they come at no cost, they're not recording any cost. The issue is if they're unable to make that commitment, if they suddenly have change of heart or they can't literally make it, and you end up having to either hire people, or you end up having to hire vehicles, or you end up having to incur other costs to try and get materials and goods services delivered differently, then you haven't built in a contingency for it. If I was a funder looking at a budget where you hadn't costed up for the concept of all the things that you've had free, I'm going to think that you can deliver it for a lot less than you actually can if any of those things fell out in terms of what you can do. And that's really, really, really important. You've got to think about, if you're running an event and somebody's helping you and assisting you, exactly as Michaela said, if you keep a separate log of all the things that were done for free, and then actually try to place an indicative cost against them, if you had to go out to a third-party person or a supplier, then you're going to have a really solid base for what your actual expenditure is when you go for funding and those bids. So you know exactly how much money to ask for.
And sometimes, but not always, if you've got that log, let's say in any given year, you could describe or account for X number of volunteer hours that might have been worth 10 or 20 pounds, depending on the type of volunteering, or 5 times you've had free venue space that could have accounted to, you know, £1,000 plus if you'd had to pay for it. That can sometimes act as match funding for certain funders, or particularly if you're developing relationships with councils or education authorities or health trusts. They will sometimes, if they can see the money that you're saving, you know, funders and public purses in such a way, they might well match fund that for you. It's just things to bear in mind for the future.
Absolutely. I mean, it just goes back to the honesty piece, and then obviously the third bullet point that we have on this tab here is apply logic, and it is just that. It's about being logical about all the costs that you're going to incur. If you have to get to A to B, how are you going to get your material across? Is it going to be for free? Are you going to have to hire a van? Are you going to have to transport it? Is there going to be a cost incurred with it? And you've got to think about the consequences of any action. So any action that you take, does it have a follow-on consequence that also generates cost? If so, be logical about it, be honest about it. As we move on, I think the key thing is obviously start early and build across multiple phases. It's really, really important to start as early as you can in terms of building budgets, and working across multiple phases we'll go through is actually just making sure that you don't just do it once, and you don't attempt to do it in one go. Nobody ever has done a budget worth anything in one go. It's simply not possible because the element of focus, the element of getting all your information together, the element of objectivity just isn't there. So for me, I always say pick an odd number, possibly. I always say start with 3, never exceed 5, because otherwise you will literally be going at it again and again and again, and that also defeats purpose. But by all means, aim to try and look at it. Take some time away, step away, and look at it. Save all workings, calculations, and assumptions. So I'm just going to run through those really quickly, and then we're going to be able to go through some other quick slides and jump on to the example. The key thing with budget methodology is this: gather as much information as you can, be as honest as you can, and like Michaela was saying about those funders, if the only person that gets affected negatively by not declaring all their costs and all their incomes when you go through for funding is yourself, because unfortunately, if you're saying that you can deliver something for much less cost than you actually can in reality, then that's what they're going to use as their basis. And they're going to say, well, you delivered it for this much, that's what you've proven to me, so why do you need more money? So it's really important to think about that. Start early if you can. It's not always possible, I appreciate, but even if you can't start early, make sure that you have multiple phases. That's a case of doing a draft, making sure you have all the lines separated out, making sure you have all the costs and the evidence and the assumptions, and then stepping away from it. Leave it, go for a walk, leave it for a couple of days if you can, come back to it. And that's really important. Stepping away from it to check to see if it aligns with the company vision is important. It's meant to be a communicating device. It's meant to tell somebody who doesn't know you, who's never spoken to you, exactly what you expect to achieve and what to do. So make sure it aligns with your company vision of where you expect it to be. Make sure it's actually showcasing and communicating that. Earlier on, just at the top of this meeting and in previous sessions, you will have covered things about PESTLE. Check to build in as much expectation as you can. I know PESTLE will be covered further, but it's really important to think about market and political decisions. In this current climate, what I would say is obviously we're coming out of COVID, but I do know that obviously economically we're being told that food and general inflation is at its all-time high. Energy suppliers are falling by the wayside, and there's a potential of conflict in Ukraine, which will only affect things such as that. So when you know that things are going up and there's been an uplift, it's important to try and build some of that in. If you know that there's going to be anything that affects your particular industry, whether it be a shake-up in terms of legislation or anything else, then that absolutely is something that you should really try and build in if you can. Revisit and ensure you're happy with it, really, and that's the key thing. It's important not to become too obsessive about it and not to go over it to the nth degree, because that is literally defeatist about the whole process. It's not meant to be exact, it is meant to be a forecast. So yeah. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to shift on to looking at the example, and the example is based upon, I've got a Word document I'm going to run through, and then I'm going to run through the Excel workings. Now, this is just running through an example, which is taking information from scratch, using this budget methodology, and also showing you that when you sort of start compiling a list in details, how that can be used to then translate the numbers into Excel and into a format and into a template that we can see. So I'm just going to stop sharing this and move my screen. And also, I'm very conscious we're going through a lot of information, so I really do appreciate it. This session is being recorded, and in terms of the templates and other pieces, I'll be sharing them with Michaela and Flourish, so you can have a look at them later. If at any point you want to come back to me and you want to actually run through any other details, you're more than welcome to. So please do.
While Gurj is pulling up his slides, has anybody got anything unclear or anything that you wanted to ask about or check here and now before you start talking through an example that might bring all of this to life? It's kind of, I've asked Gurj on purpose to walk through a scenario that brings some of this to life for the people listening here around the women's support sector. But if you've got any quick questions now, feel free to come off mute and we can check anything.
Definitely.
Nobody jumping out, but we'll pop stuff in the chat and Shelley and I can direct those questions as well. We're looking at it. So fire away, Gurj.
And I genuinely do appreciate it a lot. So I think you're all doing fantastically well, by the way, to keep up with this and stay on board. Honestly, I know how difficult.
Afternoon lull where we've had some lunch, we could do with a kit, really.
Exactly. I always get the bad time slots. I get just after lunch or when Home's Under the Hammer's on. I'm like, no one's ever engaged on this. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's one or the other. Anyway, we're going to have a look through this exercise, and what we're going to do is we're just going to run through the methodology. And just because I know people can be afraid of numbers and details, I'm going to try and showcase how literally we can translate the words that we have on this document into an actual budget template with evidence and workings. So when I talked about it being a science, this is a science part. So this is the hardest part. The art part is actually more creative, more fun, and more engaging. Company A, which is what we're going to use, and Company A is a drop-in centre. It's run by a team of friends. It's a refuge aimed at providing resources for women who've encountered grief, irrespective of age, and so it doesn't play a demographic. It uses the space to run an hour-and-a-half daily open door drop-in session where a counsellor professional is available. This is a free service to anybody who wants to book in. The space is also used to host other group meetings, training sessions, and run group activities where refreshments are provided. But this is done by the team of friends themselves. So as we mentioned, the friends themselves are covering this, so therefore, they believe that they don't have a cost or a charge. It currently employs one professional counsellor. It survives based on grant and local authority funding, and within the centre, using discounted hire, it is able to run an annual fundraising event because the centre wants to support it. It wants to produce an income and expenditure budget for 2022, but it's only been running for 6 months. It leases space from the community centre, open 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. It runs for 48 weeks in the year. The maximum number of people that the space can hold is 30. And in the last 6 months, regular group meetings have averaged 18 attendees and have been popular. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say that's like a summary that any of you may provide to me about what you do, how you work, and what your operation is. So what I'm going to do from there is saying what's really important is to generate and detail a key list. So when you're producing the budget, this is an approach I've used a great deal where I just list everything. Feel free to list everything as literally in a Word, as a document. Create a list of every single item that you have, every single activity that you have. Absolutely. So this is it. So from that detail, I can say it runs one drop-in session in the day, each 1.5 hours long. Each class is free to attend, and there's currently no charge for that. The cost of the counsellor, this is information that I've been provided with, and I can only go with the information that I have. So that's where my assumptions are. My assumptions are, this is what I've been told, this is what I'm expecting. The cost of the council is £20 an hour. The cost of the rental for the space is £12,000 a year. Point number 4, and I split them out into separate points so that there's granularity and we can go back and check them. Point number 4, the last 6 months utilities have been apportioned, and they're providing me with the details of how much I paid for 6 months for water, electric and gas. Number 5, the insurance for the studio area is £1,200 per year. They have to pay that, so that's included. Number 6, the funding for the past 6 months is as follows. A grant received of £20,000 in July the prior year to run 12 months. It's expected they would apply to the same awarding body again in April for July 22 to 23. So we've got a 12-month grant which runs from July through to June, so it goes across the years. This award is unrestricted in its use. And note that in the note, the idea about the income is being defined in how it can be used, so it's unrestricted. A local authority grant of £5,000 has been approved in late December. Will begin January 2022 for 12 months. So that's a nice clean one. Yeah, we've got some money there, and that's going to be actually the numbers have actually changed through, so I need to alter those. I'm just going to change that, I think, to 25 and also 20 liberties, I guess I can take. So the local, in an example, a local authority grant of 20,000 been awarded in late December, will begin in Jan. So that's Jan to December for 12 months. That's pretty straightforward. Unrestricted in its use. A development trust grant has been awarded to cover the cost of professional services, and that's £3,000. So this income is income that we can recognise because it's been approved and awarded, and we know that we either already have it or we know it's definitely coming through to us. A fundraising event is run at the centre every September, for which the centre itself charges a nominal discounted space hire fee of £250. And the fundraising event last September raised £3,000, and again the income was unrestricted in its use. Its budgeting year runs from January to December. Now we're going to produce a budget. That's what we're going to do. And just want to put an item to note here. A further grant has been applied for worth £16,000, which will be received in April 2022. The outcome of this is not yet known. Now, as a consequence, we're not concerned about that when we produce a budget because we have no idea of what that is. We might want to declare that separately, so we might want to show secured income and unsecured income, and that's an option we can look at, but that's just something to note of the model. Methodology, what we're going to do is identify all the items, list them out. We're going to list them all as income or expenditure to begin with. We're going to calculate the incomes, calculate the expenditures with workings. We're going to produce a monthly and annual budget for Jan to December 2022 for Company A based upon the above information and put them into a template. I'm guessing everybody is raring to go on this because this is really, really exciting. But I will just say, I know I'm hoping that some of these scenarios and some of this information is relevant to your own scenarios, because then it helps to kind of understand how it works. It's important to review the detail. Above, we have clear points identifying incomes and expenditures in this format. When approaching for yourself, the key and extremely helpful method is to list all the factors that affect your operation, like I said, and the incomes and expenditures separately. If you start off with a list and then do them as activities, whether you use a highlight or whatever it is, highlight all the ones that identify as income, highlight all the ones that identify as expenditure, and in a way, your budget comes out into the two sections already. You know exactly what the activities are. You can sort of like give them a title, give them a cost. Yeah. So what we're going to do is do that. We're going to just run through the key points, and I've just got them here. Yeah. So the cost of the counsellor, £20 an hour. Noted that. I've marked that as expenditure. So that's money that we have to pay out. The cost of the rental space is £12,000. It's expenditure. So literally we have to pay that out. There's 6 months utilities. Again, all expenditures. If you wanted to go further, actually, point 2, the cost of the rental for the space of the year. If we have a contract in place, we know that that's a fixed expenditure. We know that that will be something that is not expected to change. So that's something which is, we can account on. The insurance for the studio is £1,200 per year. Again, expenditure. And then point number 5, we look at the funding for the past 6 months. I'm just going to scroll down further. Hopefully you can all see my screen. A grant that's been received for £25,000 in July to run 12 months. It's expected, again, they'll be applying to the same body. That's income, unrestricted. Local authority grant, 20,000 has been approved in late December. Will begin in Jan 22. Is unrestricted in use, but it is still income. So market income and in brackets unrestricted. A development trust grant to cover the cost of professional services has been awarded of 3,000. The award is restricted in use because that's to cover the cost of the counsellor, but it's still income. That's fine. Point 6, the fundraising event at the centre incurs a £250 fee. As we know from the list, we're going to write it out. Yep, mark it out as expenditure. If you had your own list here, you could be highlighting it or marking it in different colours or whatever you want to do, so you can see incomes and expenditures separately. And then what you do is you have the incomes to put into the template and then the expenditures to put in the template, and then you can split them out. It makes it a lot easier. The fundraising event raised £3,000. The income was unrestricted in use, still income, so we know that's going to go under income. The refreshments are also provided at the open training event. I know it's very small, but let's pick up on it. Let's not leave anything out. Let's be fully honest, and that's expenditure. So from this, what we want to do is we want to try and build a schedule, and I'm going to go into Excel using that information and build that schedule, and we'll link it to the points. I guess the key thing is I've got this, and I will be sharing this document on further on. I've just got some detailed notes that one size does not fit all. So basically, it's used to give an idea of expected outcomes. Various versions of a budget can exist to see the outcomes in different scenarios. We're going to produce like a master version of this, like a singular version. But once you have that version, you're able to kind of flex it. So you're able to create a copy and say, what would happen in this scenario? What would happen if the income went up by X amount? What would happen if my my energy bills started to go up far more from June onwards? How would that affect the bottom line? And it's all something that you can do. Approaching it like a science and then reviewing it like an art is important, because a budget does not have to be exact. It's about getting the expectations correct, but it needs to be revisited and revised to get them as relevant and as clear as possible. But it does not have to be exact, so please take that pressure off yourself in regards to that. And if you're using that draft purpose, if you're using a draft model of coming back to review it periodically, what you'll do is you'll find that you'll pick up on things that you may have missed, you'll pick up on values that you may have underestimated or overestimated, and you'll be able to correct those accordingly. But I wanted to.
You're going to do a quick flip, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I was just, there were people commenting in the chat. I guess this will be going down in different ways for different people. There'll be some people who've been needing to see something like this for a while, going, oh, this is starting to make sense. Or there'll be others going, yeah, this makes sense. This is how we do things. Or people might be doing things slightly differently. And there'll be others who are like, oh, you know, and it's, everyone's at different stages, but we're getting some useful feedback in the chat there. And we just thought it's helpful to walk through case studies like this so you can analyze it against your own way of doing things. And if you've not put full processes in place yet, you've got a way of doing that now. And what I will see is that big long list that Gurj walked through there, you know, most of us don't sit down and kind of work that through that thoroughly. You know, Gurj is a finance geek, and he's trying to show you exactly the rationale in somebody's brain when they're putting this stuff together. Partly to leave no stone unturned, partly to show what things, you know, actually cost. And here he's going to just pop it in. I say pop it in. You go for it, Gurj, and we'll bring it to life in a spreadsheet.
Don't be silly. Don't be silly. I don't know about finance geek. Probably just geek, I think. The thing that you have to remember about that list when I was compiling it, we've compiled that from an example. So if I was to ask all of you just to send me a blurb of what you do, I'd be able to pick out certain elements of it. I'd then ask you for the finer detail in terms of costs that you may have incurred historically. We can put that together. The way to think about it is when you're compiling that list, again, that isn't a list that you can compile straight away. When we talk about approaching the budget in multiple phases, think about it as a shopping list. How often have you put a shopping list together for things that you need, and then you get to the supermarket and you come back home, you go, oh my God, I forgot that, I forgot this, I forgot the other. Think about putting a shopping list together, but not actually going to the shops and coming back to the list and checking if you need to put anything else on the list, and then coming back to it. And then actually by the third time, you're going to have the most complete list that you have. It's not going to have absolutely everything. You're probably still going to forget like something really minor, and then you're going to come back and really curse yourself. However, it's still going to be 90% plus there. That's the way to think about that list. Once you've got that list, you're going to have your incomes and expenditures. Now, I'm sharing the screen in Excel where we're going to translate those workings into backing and evidence, and then fill this template. And this template, as it stands, for those of you who are okay with budgets, absolutely fine. For those of you not, obviously, I know it's a starting point. And as a template, what this does is just forms a framework which is logical. You've got to understand that we talked about information sharing. Your budget has to speak to somebody very clearly. They've got to be able to see it and read it logically. So what we have here is income. We have income as a header, and that's this section here, which we're going to complete. And there's going to be a total of income. And then we've got expenditure underneath. And then underneath that, we've got a total of A minus B. So we've got a total of income minus expenditure. And that gives us our surplus or deficit, depending on where we are. What I've got in this is I've got all the list of items reading down vertically and horizontally reading horizontally left to right. I've got the month. So the idea is as a schedule, you can read down, read across. It has a logical pattern to it visually as well. It translates in a clear way, if that makes sense. And we'll see that when we populate it. I'm going to shift to the budget workings. So what I'm going to do is when I compile that list, and this was just about logic and helping yourself, when you go through this process, take the time to make sure you help yourself. Please don't feel rushed or anything else like this. Write everything out that you need to, whether it be an assumption, write anything out that you need to, whether it be an actual fact, but make sure that you record all of that, because that's information that you can use for the next budget, or if somebody asks you a question, you have your assumptions ready to provide them. Now,
well, if you have a growing team as well, if everything's in your head,
yes,
you know, having it down like this, even if it's changed a bit, help somebody else work through the project with you, or you know, put something together with you.
Absolutely. And if you're working with it, if you've got a team or you're building a team and you're the only person that's actually putting all this together, it's no one else is psychic. I've actually had that. I've had managers come forward and say, why isn't this included? And I was like, well, we were never told about it. Why was this not reflected? I'm like, well, you didn't tell us that you wanted that. So consequently, this is actually a way to really openly, cleanly communicate things. So what I've done is on Excel, I've created some backup and workings, and we're going to run through this, and you're going to be able to see how useful it is to take the time to produce clear, defined workings. You don't have to follow this format, follow a format that works for you, but definitely communicate to somebody else. If you're unsure of that, put it together and get a close friend who isn't actually linked to any of what you do. Say, can you work out what I'm trying to say with this? Yep, and it's really important. So what we've done on the word document is we listed everything out in words, and we listed it with points. We said point number 1, point number 2, point number 3. We defined it as income or expenditure. So what I've done here is I've kept the workings to match those points. I said working 1 here relates to point number 1 on my list, so that I can see that there's a clear link in terms of where I'm working and the information that I'm using and where it's from. So working 1 is point 1 that was we identified as an expenditure, and that is that the counsellor cost is worked out per session. So if you multiply to reflect the number of sessions and the number in a week and a month, because we want to produce a budget which is broken down by 12 months to show the monthly cost or the monthly income. So that's what we want to do. Now, what I've done here is said the counsellor cost as known to me was £20, because that's the detail that was provided to me. If you wanted to put an assumption in, you could put an assumption in that you are not aware of any uplift in this cost or any increase to that charge. So as far as you're aware, when you produce this budget, we are not aware of an increase. If they told us that it's £20, but in 3 months it's going to go to £25, absolutely we could incorporate that, but we haven't been told that, so we're not going to. The counsellor cost is £20, time is 1.5 hours, so that basically leaves in per session for £30. What I've done here to the right hand side is create a table which is really useful to start automating things. What I've then done is per session, I know that it's £30. Weekly, because there's 5 sessions, I know that because they're open, because it's a daily session that works every 5 days, I know that that's going to come in 5 times.
There's a little formula in the top for anyone who doesn't use Excel. You don't have to be a whiz at this stuff, and somebody else can help you, but there are ways of putting in formulas, and I'm not a whiz at this, but I can do this, where this K, so K is the column K,
Yeah.
and K12 is the row that it was in. Times, that little star means times. So
Yeah.
if you go back to a times 5, because you know 5 days a week they're doing this stuff. So it's just, if you're wondering how it's done, that's how it's done. And I just thought I'd mention that.
There's probably going to be a lot of call for doing an Excel session. We always say this, just but if starting off working quite small and you're working not with other software, Excel tends to be your go-to, but also it's incredibly versatile and useful. I have automated this, and the reason I'm sort of saying it's worthwhile spending time really outlining your information detail and where you get that evidence from is important. Building this helps us to get a monthly view. So if we know it's £30 a session, we know there's 5 sessions a week, we multiply that by 5, gives us 150. And then what we do is we say, right, absolutely, we know that, and this is where the difference comes in. So I've said, so we know that it's 30 per session, right? We know that it's then going to be 5 sessions per week. Yep. And then we know that actually there's 48 weeks. Yeah, that's information given right at the top. That gives us an annual value of 7,200 in terms of a cost for the counsellor. If we want to get a monthly amount, absolutely arbitrarily, let's divide that by 12 to get as a monthly value. So that's where we get the monthly value in terms of the counsellor. Hopefully that's clear as an example of working through the fact that it's £20 for the counsellor, it's 1.5 hours a session, it's 5 days a week. From that, you're able to start to understand, oh wow, that's what it is. That's actually the cost. The other thing that I have done is, I mean, I could link this cell to this pound per session. And then if, for example, let's say we want to try and play around in the workings to understand what the monthly and annual charge may be, if the counsellor cost went up, I can hopefully in this cell change this maybe to 25 as we discussed. And as you can see here, this shifts to show that it's actually going to be 37.50 per session. And that means that annually it's going to be £9,000. So going up £5 an hour means that the actual annual impact is £2,000. And it starts to show you something really quickly. It's actually has such a small incremental change, which you might not think is that big, actually can have an impact. And it starts to give you that forecasting capability, doesn't it, way ahead of time. So hopefully that's clear and useful. Is anyone any questions? Because I know that's quite a lot to take in as an example. Or is that okay with everybody?
Somebody's saying that they've been practicing using this on YouTube, and sometimes hearing it from someone like yourself makes this a lot clearer, you know.
But
and it's still, you know, if you're new to this, this can still be a bit baffling, but it's a practice makes perfect thing. And sometimes just seeing it and seeing this as an option, if you've been writing everything down on paper or just putting bits of tables together, knowing that this is something to do in future or work towards or get support to do is really helpful. And even if you've been messing about with spreadsheets for years, or you've been kind of forced to use one by a line manager or somebody that handed you this thing, you can always improve on what you've got.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more on all those points. If I can do it, anyone can do it. It's literally like that. And the whole piece about this is just, you know, a bit of trial and error and playing around with things. But the whole point about this, again, is its efficiency. If you're doing a budget and you've got this working, and let's say you're doing it for 2022, when it comes to 2023, you've already got this template. So what you can do is just go, right, if I've still got the counsellor, I just need to know what their current cost is now. And you can alter the cost. It gives you the detail. It gives you all that information. So it's about making the best use of your time. If you're running a venture, the budget is meant to, obviously you want to keep in close contact with the budget and the cash flow, because they're going to continue to tell you where you are. As I said before, they're going to be your best friends. You want to keep them close, but you don't want to keep them so close that you can't actually deliver what you need to do. If you're so much in the detail financially, it's not going to work for you. So the whole idea about trying to build these templates and run through this particular exercise is to show how a budget can quite easily and quickly be put together. And then if you need to make amends to that budget, it's quite quick to do that rather than going back to the drawing board and re-entering stuff again. And that's the point. It's to save you time. There's an irony of things. There's an irony of people not actually perhaps producing an activity and worrying about producing the activity. And if they produce the activity, they'd have the output anyway. So I think that's the key thing that we're trying to get through here.
Do you want to walk through the scenario bit, Judge? I'm conscious it's 2:20 and we're due to start to move into ones about 1:30. So I just wonder if you wanted to, I'm not sure what you're...
I'm just going to run through these and I should be done.
Fine. Sorry, it's me just keeping time.
I'm happy to share these so you can see that. And what I've done under each all the workings. So I've got workings for all the points that we had. So I'm just going to scroll through. So I've got workings for, bear with me, working 2, working 3, working 4. Obviously, what should be working 5, 6, and then additional. Now, what I've done here is I've just linked those back to the details on the Word document. If you had your list and you gave them a number, we should have a working that corresponds to that number. So it'll be a working for that one, but whatever number that might be. And as we can see in working 2, this is, for example, the rental for the space that we have. And what I've done is I've said, we know this is a fixed cost determined at the start of the year. We assume an equal monthly payment as no other information is available. Absolutely fine to put that down, right? And we know that it's going to be £12,000. So therefore, what we know is that actually it's going to be £1,000 monthly. And I've continued to use this table and recurrence, because what this does is just doing this gives me an apportionment of cost or income based upon a given period of time, whether it's annually, whether it's monthly, weekly, or per session. And what you'll find is that what you're able to do, if you took down all of these boxes, so I've done the working free for the utilities, and in the utilities, what I've done is I've said that the half-year figures are 120, 300, and 150, because we don't have any other information available, because we're not aware of anything that's happening. We're going to have to assume that they're going to be for full year, it's going to be double that amount. So I've just doubled them up, because that's all the information that we have, put them in as annual amounts, divided them by 12 to get me a monthly, and then basically got a weekly weekly value by dividing that by 4, and then basically got a session by dividing that value by 5. So it's literally, that's the way of getting it, but it gives me an idea that per session, I'm expecting my water to cost me 50p. Per session, I'm expecting the fact that my rental cover is £50. What this starts to do, and we're going to go into the budget, but essentially, this kills not 2, but quite a lot of birds with 1 stone. 1, it sets workings and evidence which are clearly communicated to anybody else who wants to understand where your numbers came from. 2, what it does is it starts to showcase, especially for the case of expenditure, how much it costs you per session. That helps to determine pricing. That helps you to determine, actually, what is my cost to run a session? Therefore, if I need to recover that cost, how many people do I need to get in? How much do I need to charge for a group session to make sure I'm covering my water, my electric, my gas, my rent, my insurance, all of those things. So for example, we've done the same thing with insurance here, £1,200. We just said it's a fixed cost. We assume it's apportioned over 12 months. We don't know any different. So that's going to be £100 monthly. Weekly, divide that by weekly, it's going to be less, and then per session we've got £2.50. So it's just about going down to the lowest common point. And then we've also done the same thing with income. So we know that annually it's 25,000. So we know that monthly it's going to be approximately 2,083, because we've not been told anything different about how that grant is paid and marked out and how it's going to be apportioned. So if they came back to us and said actually £20,000 is going to be spent in January, and then the £5,000 is going to be spent in June, we'd be able to split that out. But we're doing this because we have no other information. So it's absolutely fine to state your assumption and reflect your assumption. There's no issue there. Working 7, the annual fundraiser, and I've just put down here, this value is based on the value raised last year. Consideration of the conditions that was held in can be important, but if you feel this is a good reflection of what will be achieved and have no other information, basically you have no other insight, that's what you need to go with. We're going to have to say that we're going to expect £3,000 again. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of trying to produce evidence, if that makes sense to everybody. And I'm just going to move to the budget master really quickly. The budget master is a template that we used. It's exactly that template that you saw. So you have income. I've just put some nice colors on it. You've got income section A, and then you've got a total here. And in there, I've just put all the different types of income that we have. What we have is we have from our budget workings, just going to slip back to working 6, which was incomes. We've got the type of funding. We've got grant, local authority, development body funding. If you go to the budget master, we've got grant, local authority, development body. And those numbers are monthly numbers picked out from the budget working, having taken the annual amount and apportioned them monthly. And we can therefore see how much it's going to cost us weekly and per session. Same has been done with the annual fundraiser. But the thing about the annual fundraiser is I know that happens in September. So all that money's there because that's the information I've been given. We had a question earlier from Alice to talk about with the timing of costs and when things will hit. We know that, for example, in this example, the fundraiser happens in September. So we can't recognize that income beforehand because it's not going to be generated beforehand. So that's why it's put there into the budget. That's what you expect it to be. What you can see is I've just put a line in for other income because as things develop, as things grow, you might start selling items, merchandise, etc. that might come through. That gives you a total here at the bottom, and this is just a sum of everything above it. So this is a sum of here. What you'll note here again is the grant. This might apply to you. The grant when you ran from July to June, I haven't included a balance from July onwards because we haven't put that application in. So we don't know the outcome of that. It would be wrong for me to be budgeting something for which I have no idea of it coming in for, if that makes sense. That's like me saying, I'm going to win the lottery next week. So basically, I'm going to forecast that I'm going to be a millionaire. I have no idea of that happening. So, unless you can evidence it, please don't put it in, if that makes sense. just going to run through expenditure, Jessica, and then I'll be able to pick up the question.
Can I just take a question, Gurj? Jessica has put her hand up, so I'm just seeing if you've got a key question there.
Yeah, if you're doing this cash flow for an application for a grant, would you show that grant in the cash flow that you're applying for?
It depends, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It depends on whether typically the advice and the guidance in the grant application should tell you whether you should include it, and also if you include the income from the grant, it should also show the expenditure lines as to how you expect it to be spent. So to see in the cash flow what your typical operations would be. And what I've done before, I worked with an organisation just to look at the Arts Council Fund, and what we did is we produced two versions. We produced their cash flow as it was standard in terms of their incomes and their expenditures, and then we said, right, let's produce another version where we include a line for that grant being received, and we put it in the timing that is expected, and then we also put in the expenditure, so we had one with and one without. And the thing
it's quite easy to do that, isn't it? Once you've got the one without, let's say your normal one, then you just copy, if you know this, Jessica, but you just copy, you can, you know, in this little, do you want to hover over that arrow in the corner, Gurj? You know, where you would select all? You just click select all. If you were to click on that and copy it, create a new tab from the little star at the bottom, or not star, plus next to the tabs at the bottom, and it creates a new page. You can just paste that in. So whatever you've already done, you kind of copy into a new sheet, and then you can change the workings or add in a new line, whether you do or don't need, you know, the funder's asking for it or not. It just gives you a steer as well on what happens if you don't get that money in some funders. So for example, the Social Enterprise Support Fund that's out at the moment, and it's just closed, and then it comes out again for another round in March. They do ask for you to show why you need this, and they want to see what happens with their money and what happens without it, and it can show you how you're going to, it's a bit scary, but it can show you how you're going to end up in certain types of deficit. But there is the other point on this as well, that you don't always have to, it's not being sneaky, but if things are a bit of a guess anyway, you don't always have to show everything, or you can increase certain assumptions in certain cases if you need to make a point, or if there's something that's, let's say you're putting in one of these things, grant B from wherever, and it's not confirmed yet, you can make little notes on these cells. Let's say you were going to get some money coming in July and you think it's £1,500 or £5,000. You can make a note on it to say whether or not it's secured, or whether or not you still got to, you know, you're waiting for confirmation, because all of these things start to, when you start deleting some of the things that aren't confirmed, you know, you soon might get into the negative.
No, absolutely.
Your hand's still up there, Jess. I'm not sure if you've got further points or questions. Do come back to Gurj.
I'll run through that really quickly now, because basically, just exactly what Nicola said. Obviously, we've just gone through income, and what I've done in expenditure. So we've got the expenditure section here. So let's say that this is your, for hypothetically speaking, to say this is your cash flow and your budget without the grant funding. And what we've got all the expenditures. So we've got the cost of the counsellor, so we know it's £540 a month. We've taken that from our workings. The rental is £1,000, and that we know that because it's going to be 12,000 a year. We've got these based upon the workings that we've already done here on this other tab. Same with insurance. The fundraising event hire cost is £250. We know that that's going to be incurred in September when the annual fundraiser happens, and refreshments and sundries are provided. And I was just talking about honesty. I've just put £20 in there as a guess of what you might spend on biscuits and tea, depending upon how many biscuits and tea you eat and drink. So that's that piece. Now, when we've got all of those expenditures that we've been notified of, and we're assuming that this is everything, we've been fully honest, fully logical, that gives us a total expenditure. This line in blue gives us a total of the income minus the expenditure. So it starts to show us that actually we're actually pretty flush for the first month. And the reason for that is because we've got this grant up here, which is contributing £2,000 in each month. Because we're not sure about receiving that grant, we haven't put it in. And it means that if we didn't get that grant, you can see that actually our surplus falls to quite a lower number, such as £162. So it's not fantastic. It does mean, however, overall in the year, we're looking to be 17,190, which is great. But my question would be, apart from certain spikes, what's happening in these months? Is there any other income that we could possibly generate? Could we start charging for the group sessions, perhaps, because there's currently no charge? That would cover either the refreshments, it would cover some of the utilities. and it will start to give us a bit more of an income. So as I said, the budget starts to signpost periods of strength, periods of weakness, and it starts to say, right, if I know that the grant might not come in by July, I need to do something else for it. And that's really important. Just really quickly, Jess, just to kind of give you an idea, yes, you have a master. Yes, by all means, you can use it for your own purposes. You might want to give it out to funders. You can create other versions. What I've also done as well, I've just put a comment piece in here. If you want to send this out to funders or anybody else, you can copy and paste the section here and exclude the comments. That can just be for yourself, can be a reminder, it could be something to share amongst your team. And I've just put, this is based upon income last year. I've put down here based upon the profile of the last 6 months, based upon there being no other information. And that's just a marker for someone to understand where that came from. So you're always using it to communicate. But in your example, when you're talking about grant funding, let's say you want to say that this is your budget without the grant. What you could do is quite easily, if I just right click and go to move a copy, I'm going to create a copy here. I'm going to okay it. I'm going to end up with a second tab which takes the detail exactly. And what I'd say here is I'm just going to put in grant, and I might just put in the fact that I'm going to get, and I don't know what the grant is, I'm just assuming, but let me just put in the fact that I'm going to get 25,000 there. Yeah. And then what I might say is expenditure related monies, and literally just be in the case of saying, right, I'm going to spend £5,000 for the next 5 months. Yeah. And that would be, so therefore you've got your budget without the grant detail in. And if I go to this tab, you've got your grant and expenditure related to grant there. It really is that straightforward and simple to put together if you wanted to. And if you get,
even if you don't have all this stuff, right, even if you're looking at this thinking, God, I'm 6 months away from here, or 12 months away from here, or mine doesn't quite look like this, you can use templates like this to muck around and scenario plan, and you know, project different options. And we've not covered that hugely today, but that's something we can look at in that, whether it's just monkeying around to see what would happen if, when you play about with these figures in the overall spreadsheet, or whether it's monkeying around to see, well, what if we charged £35 rather than the 20, or what if we got, you know, 6 clients instead of 2 a month. You can start to see what a step change could look like in terms of both income options, and think through what that means for your operational costs as well. So,
and that's the piece where we talked about it being, we've done the creation piece in terms of it being a science. This next piece that Nikhil's talking about really is the art piece, and working with that, using it as an art, going back and continually checking in on it is a key way to sort of understand, right, if I tweak this, if I tweak that, actually if the grant comes in, actually if water goes up by £20 a month, actually if my fundraising event higher cost goes up, you can start projecting that and playing around with the model and see how that affects the bottom line. And then what you can start to do is start to build in plans and contingencies. As I said, it's your best friend. It will always signpost. If it identifies an issue, it's signposting towards a solution. And so that's the key thing. Always think about it positively. That's the most important piece about the budget. And as honest as you are with it, that's fine. If the water and gas was going up and you weren't actually reflecting that on here, the only person you're cheating is yourself. So it's a case of just continually tweaking it and reviewing it and making sure that it's there for you, because it's a communicator to the wider world, but it's almost like the presentation of yourself. You know?
And even if everything in a template like this for you right now looks quite simplistic, and half of the income lines haven't got stuff in, or you know, there might be like some basic stuff. Start as you mean to go on. I wouldn't wait until you're in a position where you're going for larger money or you've got higher turnover. Putting in even your simple basics for whatever you're doing now, or whatever stage you're at now, then this thing can evolve and grow as new income and new expenditure starts to kick in as things evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's a case of don't wait for winter, don't wait for the snow to hit to go buy that coat, buy it in summer so you can have it in advance and you know that you're going to be ready. It's that kind of thing. It's making sure that you're always putting it in. Don't be scared of using it. Don't think it's not applicable to you. It's absolutely applicable to you, even if it's not on a simplistic basis, because you're going to have a foundation on which you can grow and add other detail. And don't think, oh, well, I don't need to have a budget. Every organization, every venture, every idea needs to have a budget. How many times have you watched Dragon's Den and someone's come in with a life-changing idea? They get to the financials and they fall apart, and literally they get kicked out. And it's because they didn't do the budget beforehand. So it's like, some people think they're invincible and outside of it, and you're not. And also, it's not something that's there to terrorize you. It's something that's there to actually really help you.
Certainly help you sleep at night. As small organisations, when you're juggling a lot, to keep this sort of stuff in your head or to be best guessing it is stressful, either because you realise it is or because you're kind of internalising the stress of the unknown. And I think once you get this stuff down, whatever, on paper, in Excel sheets, or have somebody to help you, you're freed up then to make progress in whatever way is best, you know, for your energy and for the organisation. Conscious of time, Gurj.
Absolutely.
That's been a big whistle stop, and I appreciate we've moved quite quickly through that, and we are, you know, thankfully recording this so that people can go back and look at what was that bit again, and we have this scenario as a women's support kind of group that Gurj has done. We do have another scenario of like a yoga studio that he did a little while ago, but it'd be great to just grab a little bit of feedback from people, whether that was like, oh yeah, I digested that, that's been helpful, or whether, oh, it was all too fast and I need to go away and get some extra time to think about this. But any feedback is good feedback to help us just see what you made of it. You've stuck with it. We've had a couple leave early doors, whether or not they were fried or whether or not they got stuff to do. We've certainly had a few people have had to go and start sessions and things that they run, but great to get some feedback off people. And I'll just pause our recording and say thanks ever so much to Gurj.
Yeah, no, not at all.